Hi guys, in this video I'd just like to cover shifts inside Pitram and how they work. This would probably be a great video to watch just after you've watched the introduction video to data acquisition, where I cover what events are, because I see events and shifts as being quite related, and it might be useful to watch that video just before you watch this video. But if I just dive into data acquisition now, we can see that I have my day shift. Wednesday the 23rd is my current active shift. Now, to me, what that means is, and the way shifts work in my mind, is that the shift acts like a container for events. So if I was to capture an event right now, the way I see it is that that event is now gone and it's inside this current shift container, so the day shift. So if I open Event Editor, which is open to the same shift, you can see that that event has now appeared in here. Now, when you do open shifts in Event Editor, which is how you have to actually access that data, everything is broken down by shift because the events exist inside shifts. When you run reports, you do have other options. You don't have to run the report for a shift. You can run it for a day or a week or a month, but that's just kind of more containers on top of this initial shift container. So when you set up your shifts on site, you can define the time, so it can be in line with when your actual shift changes. And you can also have multiple or 3 or more shifts if that's what your operation does. In Australia, it seems to be mostly 2 shifts. But overseas, we have a lot of sites who run like 3 or 4 different shifts within a 24-hour period, and that can be supported as well. So when you set up your site initially, one decision that you do have to make is whether or not shift change is going to be an automatic process or a manual process. And whether or not you do that really depends on how the operation works. Automatic shift change works really well for some operations, but for some of them where maybe the charge up guys are late coming out, it doesn't work as well as a manual shift change. So if we just jump into Reference Edit, into our shift table, which is just under configuration items and miscellaneous, we can see I've got my day shift and my night shift defined here. If I just open this up, we can see all the configuration options. So my shift start time, my end time, whether or not the shift should roll over automatically. So this is 2, which means that the shift will automatically roll over, and also the operators will have no ability to manually start or end the shift. If I set that to 1, it's automatic rollover as well, but the operators can manually start or end it if they choose to. And if I set it to 0, that's full manual shift change. So I'm just going to leave it on 2 for this point in time because that is my preference. We also have shift number. This basically defines whether it's the first shift or the second shift. So in my instance, this is day shift, so I've got this on 1, which is fine. We also have the choice of doing automatic deallocations. Now, what that means is that when the shift rolls over, either manually or automatically, the operators are automatically deallocated from the equipment and the locations. Whether or not this is useful and it saves the control room time just depends on the reality of what happens in the operation. Sometimes it's useful and other times it's scary because you're deallocating operators who haven't actually left the mine yet, in which case you should probably have that set to 0. It's operation specific, it varies, but you do have that option there as well. When you do run reports, you'll also have the ability to select shifts, and as I went over before, the shift is just the container for all of the events. So if I go into my period selector in here, we can just see that I have all of my shifts in here. So when I select, for example, the 18th, if I go to day, ultimately all that's doing is selecting the day shift and the night shift for the 18th and then combining them together. And then vice versa as I move up into week, month, right? It's just combining those containers together. So it's just a grouping. I hope that all makes sense. Shifts are a pretty integral concept to understand. it's a very good idea as well just to keep an eye on, making, and if you are on like a manual site, it's a great idea to make sure you are on the right shift. It does happen. And fortunately, if you do make a mistake on manual shift change, it's not a big problem. We can just recreate the shifts manually. Shifts being messed up doesn't ultimately result in any data loss as long as we fix it up. The events are still there, even though they're not in a shift container yet. I hope that all makes sense. Thank you for your time.